And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Microsoft 365, Building Dashboards in Excel. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. He is one of our very own New Horizons instructors, Mike Martin. Mike, you now have the floor.
Hey, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. As you know, my name is Mike, and I will be the presenter for today's class on building a Excel dashboard. And here's what we'll get through. First of all, I'm going to just show you Sparklines. Everybody needs to know Sparklines, and I'm going to just throw that in right at the beginning. And then we're going to start talking about how to manage data. Now, a lot of you know this, but Excel is a spreadsheet. We put data into tables. So I'll make sure that we have our data in the tables. And then once it's in a table, I will make a pivot table. And a pivot table is a way to really query your data. And remember, the word query is just Latin for question. So when you have a question about your data, you build a pivot table to answer it. We'll go ahead and show you how to analyze that data in a pivot table. And for us visual learners, we have to make a pivot chart. So we're going to make a pivot chart. We'll use slicers. And then I'm going to turn it into a dashboard. And a dashboard is an interactive tool where people can get the answers that they need quickly, fast, and efficiently, and not have to, go through all of the rows of data to figure out what they need to know. I'd like to introduce myself, just so everybody knows. My name is Mike. I've been a facilitator of training for a long time, well over 20 years. My specialty is Microsoft products, so anything from Windows to Azure to Word to Power BI. That's what I do. I am a specialist in Excel, and I'm a Microsoft trainer, and all our New Horizons trainers are certified. I also do essential skills, and I'm from the great city of St. Paul, which is next to Minneapolis, but St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm married with 3 daughters. Hey, it's only an hour, right? So my job is to keep your engagement up, and your job is to keep those distractions down. And I'm talking about the distractions that you can control, right? Like email, social media, cell phones, things like that. Just focus in for an hour. As you know, it is only an hour, and we will try. I know I have a hard time with this because I love to show people how to use these programs, but I'm going to try super hard. And my aunt is always ready to go to help me with the Q&A at the end of the course. Okay, so that's kind of the outline, and here I go. So I'm going to go ahead and end my slideshow, minimize my windows, and have a file in good old Microsoft Excel. Now, this is a demo. This is a small piece of what we do in the training room. So if you want to take notes and just kind of understand the concept of what I'm going through, that's half the game, just understanding the concept. So a typical spreadsheet, and it's within a workbook, right? So I have US sales, Mexican sales, Canadian sales. I'm tracking our unit prices, our total sales, and then I have a data sheet. And I also have a range of data. So more on those words. And listen to the words that I'm using. A range of data as opposed to a table. All right. Let me go back to the US sales. I am tracking the sales of 21 people. How do I know there's 21? Well, because I'm supposed to be working with these folks, but also when you select anything in Excel, watch your status bar, right? That's the bar on the bottom. And it says, Mike, way down there on the bottom on the status bar, it says you have 21 people selected. So that's how I know. Also, whatever you select in good old Excel, always watch your status bar in all your programs, actually. So now that I selected a bunch of numeric values, it's telling me the average and the count and the littlest one and the biggest one and how much they are all added together, $2 million. All right. Now we are tracking our sales rep sales. And again, I'm visual, so I got conditional formatting on there. So it's like, ooh, right there, pretty good sales right there, right? So I can tell that right off the bat. But Sparklines have been around for a while. And now I'm using the desktop version of 365. So this is the desktop version. But everything I train on today, everything I show you is available in every version. Okay. So it's not unique to 365. All right. Where was I? Sparklines. Sparklines are mini graphs. Okay. And you can just go ahead on your ribbon and go to Insert. And there's a group called Sparklines. And you can put a line graph in. That's what I do all the time. Columns seem a little hard to decipher with this amount of data. And win-loss means show the positive numbers above the line, negative numbers below. So I'm going to choose line. Then Excel is saying, well, what's your data range? So there's that word again, range. And the data range is right there. So first sales rep is Mike Martin and his yearly sales. Where do you want the spark line? In J5. So I'll say, okay. So see, now I can visually see this character named Mike started off okay. He nosedived around the third quarter, and then he really brought it up the fourth quarter. And if I use my fill handle, now I can visually see how each rep did. And because of the conditional formatting and the spark lines, if numbers do change, of course, the condition change on the formatting, and so do the spark line. All right, so that's the spark line. Pretty easy and really beneficial for analyzing data. Now, speaking of data, remember Excel wasn't built as a database. Through the years, it brings on the tools to manage data because people just don't use Access. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a data sheet with a bunch of data in it. So I don't know where I'm at. Well, actually I do. I could look at my name box. I'm on column F, row 2003. So that's where I'm at. But I want to get home. So the keystroke is Control Home. Always brings you to the top of your data set. And Control END, Control End, brings you to the end. So I always know my data set, right? I got data from M 2024 through column A, row 5. So I know my data set. Hey, another really good keystroke, just so you know, if you got to select a bunch of data, you know, drag select is an option if you have a small amount of data, but Excel can hold up to 1,048,000 rows. So you're not going to be sitting there drag selecting, you know, 30,000 rows. So you click where you want to start and then use your Control, Shift, in combination with your arrow keys. So for example, I want to go down. So I hold my Control Shift down arrow, and now I selected that whole column. Control Shift up arrow, I can go up. Click on the beginning cell, Control Shift right arrow to the right, Control Shift down arrow. So that's much quicker to select data sets, especially when you got large data. All right, so again, I got to go home, Control Home. Now, This is a range of data. It's just data in a spreadsheet. But I said you put data in the tables. I always put data in the tables. And it's super easy. Here's how you do it. Just click one piece of data. So don't be hanging out here. There's no data out there. One piece of data, doesn't matter. And then you go to Insert. And right below the Insert key is the Table command. It's been there for a long time. Click on Table. Now look at the formula. It says, hey, we're going to grab everything from A4 through M2024. Now, see, that's a range. That's a range. And notice the dollar symbols. That means it's locked in. So when you build a pivot table off a range, your data is locked in. If you add more data, you better extend the range. But now I'll say okay, and I convert it to a table. So now this is a table. Over here on the right is a spreadsheet. Two different things. Because when I click on my table, I now have a contextual tab on my ribbon called Table Tools. All right, well, what's the benefits of a table? Everything you need to manage data is automatically turned on. Okay, look at the formatting. Banded rows. Dark light, dark light, dark light. So 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon, you're going to be able to decipher your data a whole lot better than just black and white. Another thing, all your filters are turned on automatically and intuitive sorts. So all sorting and filter, intuitive sorts and filters, okay? You don't even have to worry about freezing panes, because when I scroll down, the column headers pop into the column indicators. So I know what I'm looking at when I scroll down. Another thing you can do is on the table tools, right within the table style options, which is right below the design tab, you can add a total row. And when you add a total row, oh my goodness, your bottom row is added automatically. And when you click in each cell, you click on the little down arrow and there's all your measures. So I can find the average price. I can add up the quantity. I can maybe count the sales. And when you filter, so I just want to see what we're doing for our cameras. There's exactly what we're doing for our cameras. 231 sales. I'm going to add up our total sales at $880,000. So no matter what filter, no matter what sort, no matter what you do, that total row is always there. It will stay once you set it up. It always remembers what you set up with the measures, and you can always turn on or off that total row. So I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to clear my filter to get all my data back. Okay? Well, that's just the beginning, actually, of what tables can do. Because the biggest thing about a database, I call them database wreckers, are garbage in, garbage out, and duplicates. So notice that way on the left, you have a tool for duplicates to remove them all. You have slicers, more on that later. And way to the left, I can name this table. And I'm a big proponent of naming tables, naming ranges, naming cells. So you got to name them. So I'm going to name this data our current sales. No spaces. So I named it. All right. Oh, wait a minute. I almost forgot the biggest part of this. Oh, I'm so glad I didn't. Here's the biggest part of the table. Everybody hang on now. This is huge. I went down to the bottom. I'm going to add some more data. Now I'm just typing it in, okay? I could be copying, pasting. I could be importing. I could be appending. I could be typing. But nonetheless, I'm adding data. And as I add data, the table grows. So it's dynamic. So you always base your pivot tables off of tables, because when you add more data, it captures it automatically. When you base it on a range, you better expand your range, otherwise your data won't be correct. So that the fact that they're dynamic, that's the biggest part of the whole table. All right. Now I want to analyze this data. I got to figure out how to analyze it. So I'm going to build a pivot table off of it. So I just click on the data, go to insert, and way over on the left is a command, extreme left, for a pivot table. And notice that it says here, you should always base it on a table. It has my table name in there. But I'm telling you, 90% of the people I work with, both in corporate situations and in the classroom, base it on a range because they don't know what a table is. But now you do. We can put it in a new worksheet. Okay. Say okay. So a new sheet ended up in my workbook. I'm going to double click and name it quick. Double click and name it quick. So this is going to be my sales query. Over on the left is the pivot table. This is a spreadsheet. When you're on the pivot table, you have a pane that holds the answers to your query. You can filter data. Most pertinent information goes into rows, secondary into columns, and then values. So the way I want to analyze this is I want to put regions into rows. I'm going to see how our salespeople are doing per region. And then our total sales, boom, into values. So they put it all into rows for some reason, but that's no problem. I just say put the data total sales into the values. I just drag and drop. And I want to look at one salesperson at a time. So I filter it. So now there is my pivot table. And look at, I've got all the regions. I can use my drop down in the filter, select multiple items, deselect all, and say, hey, I just want to look at what Brooks and Cooper are doing. Brooks and Cooper are doing 457,000. These numbers are in thousands, broken down by per region. So now it's answering my question, how are the reps doing in each region? And I can see that clearly. But as I think about it, I can't see it that clearly because look at, in B1, it says multiple items. After about 5 minutes, I'm like, who am I looking at again? Oh yeah, Brooks and Cooper. So I can't see it that clearly. So what I'm going to do is select all my reps again. And there's an old saying, I don't know if you heard this or not, but you want to slice and dice your data. So slicers are interactive filters. So I'm on a pivot table. I got my pivot table tools in the contextual tab. And over in the filter group, I'm going to add a slicer. And you know what? I'm going to add a slicer for the region, for the quarter. Even though I don't have that data in here, it's still part of my data set. Even though I'm not looking at it, it's still part of my data set. So I can add quarter. I want to add products too. So now when I say, okay, I've got all my tools here. These are called slicers. And I'm going to add one more. So I get back in my pivot table, analyze. I'm going to add salesperson 2. So I will spend time rearranging these in a bit, because remember, our goal is a dashboard. We're just setting it up now. And now I can click and say, hey, what did Anderson do? Well, now I'm looking at just Anderson. What did Anderson do in the Northwest? 49,000. How about in the first quarter? 15,000. How about on cameras? 3,000. Isn't that amazing? And you can even do multiples. So I'm going to clear out the filters, the little red X's on my slicers. One more question. What did Powell and Brooks do in the Southeast? The fourth quarter on laptops. $5,000. Now, remember, just think how hard it would be to answer that same question looking at this big data sheet. Now, we could, obviously we could, with our total rows and our sorts and our filters, but I'm saving time. I'm looking real visually, and this is awesome. So the answer's over in the pivot table. But you know what? I kind of want something visual too. So I keep moving these around. Believe you me, I'll straighten them all up in a little bit here. So now I do have a pivot table, and that's perfect for logical thinkers, right? But now let's base a pivot chart off our data. That's a different tool. So I'm going to go back to my data set. I'm going to go to the insert ribbon. And in the insert ribbon, we have a big group here called charts. And in the charts, there is a pivot chart. Oh, so I'll click on it. And the same thing here now. Select a range or a table. Now remember, the first option is a table. We named it, so we're on the right table. And we're going to throw this chart into a new worksheet. Okay. So now on my new worksheet, I do have a pivot table way on the left, because they give you kind of 2 for 1 here. In the middle is my chart. And again, all the fields that answer the question. But now on a chart, it's a little different. So yes, I can filter. Most pertinent information goes into axes. You can also show a legend. And then the numbers you are aggregating. Are you summing? Are you averaging, counting? That's in the values. So I'm going to go back to my chart. And I'm going to look at how we're doing per region. Oh, look at they threw region right into the axes. I also want to look at the salesperson. And then their total sales. So I'm going to put the total sales over in the values. Maybe make my chart a little bigger. Because see, now I always resize in the corner. But now I can see how all the reps are doing in the Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest and West. So we're doing really well. Austin's doing really well in the Midwest. And Anderson's doing really well in the West. So see, I'm already making decisions. I'm already analyzing my data visually. I can do a little better, I think. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put quarters. How are we doing per quarter in the legend? Now it gets a little messy, but it's still giving me good information. And I'm going to keep this chart the way it is for now, because this chart is connected to this data set here. It's running a query. And I got to fix this all up. So now I've got the chart made. I've got the table made. Now I'm going to start putting together a dashboard so that my colleagues can make good decisions off of it. And when I say off of it, remember this chart and the table, the pivot table, is all coming off of the data sheet. That's where it's all coming off. And since I put it in or converted it to a table, no matter what, if I add more data to it or take data away, I'm always going to get the correct information, because I just happen to have a range of data. Most people make pivot tables, remember, insert a pivot table, off of a range. And that range has the dollar symbols in there, and those dollar symbols mean they're absolute. So it's going to make a pivot table off of A1 through L 2161, and it's locked. It's absolute. So if you add more data, you better change your range. And that's what people don't think about. And also, if you're the holder of the data, we're called data practitioners, the last thing you want to hear is, are you sure this is correct? That's the last thing you ever want to hear, right? You want to be confident. Yeah, it's correct. So that's why I'm making a big point. Don't make it off a range. Make it off a table. Hey, I really don't need this range because I'm just showing you this spreadsheet as an example. So I'm going to right-click the tab and hide it. I don't want to delete it. I might use it for my next class. So I hide it. Another thing, sheet 2 is where I made that pivot table. Sales by region. Well, always name your sheets. Always name your sheets. Another thing, we are visual learners. So change the color of your sheets too. If you're talking sales, don't use red. All right, so now I'm changing the color of my sheets too. All makes it easier to analyze in the long run. All right, now let's fix it up. As I was talking, this total sales is kind of bugging me because I don't think that's correct. So I'm going to clear off all my filters and see I made a little mistake, which is very common, right? This is the count of total sales. Oh, that's the count. Something doesn't seem right. So I look, oh yeah, count. So when I click on the pivot table, you can adjust the measures. They're called measures. Now, that's in the value quadrant. So see, it says down here in the lower right, count of total sales. Well, you click on the little down arrow, and this gives you a menu of every single thing you can do with that field. And most of them I don't even pay attention to because I drag and drop them. I just use my delete key. So the big one is right here, value fields settings. So the setting of this field. The default that just happened to happen is count. Well, I want sum. Now you can put a custom name in there too. You can just say total sales. So you can do a custom name for the column. I want total sales, the sum of them. Here's your other measures. And then in the lower left is where you format it. So we're going to format it as currency, 2 decimal points, and a currency symbol. Oh, the name exists. Okay. So now that makes more sense. That's correct. So now that looks right, and you got to double check. So now it is total sales by money. And another thing I'd like to do is I'm going to bring that chart over. So sales by region. I'm going to select the chart, cut it, and paste it over here. So see, you can cut and paste. And now, when I use my slicers, I'll see again Anderson. What are they doing with cameras in the Northeast? Notice the pivot table is changing, but the chart is not. Because these slicers don't know how to interact with the chart because it's from a different table over here. But it all comes from the same data source. So when in doubt, right click. So my slicers aren't working with the chart. So I right click a slicer. I read all these options in the flyout menu, but I just happen to know it's report connections, which makes sense. So I click on it, and I want to connect to both pivot tables. See that little check mark there? I want to connect to both. So say, okay, region, report connections, both charts, products, report connections, both, and then the last slicer. Same thing. So now I'm looking at Anderson sales in the Northeast for cameras in the first 2 quarters. And I hover over, I got my tooltips, and now everything's working. What is Brooks doing in the Southwest on mobile phones in the first quarter? Not a whole lot. So I'm going to clear everything out. So now both my table and chart is connected to the slicers. And you know what? I'm going to clean it up. So the pivot chart, I'm going to move just a little bit further in. There we go. Get rid of the slicers, get them down here, get them out of the way for now. And then I want to move the pivot chart. Now it's like, how do you move a pivot chart? You can't select the data and drag it, but you can move pivot charts. In your pivot table tools, you go to Analyze, and in the Actions group, check it out. There's a command that says move the pivot table. And I'm looking at my sheet, and lets me type in a location. I'm just thinking it would look nice in cell C2. Let me just type in a new location, C2. Say okay. Okay, why isn't this cooperating? But you can move the pivot table. There we go. What I did was instead of typing it in, I just clicked where I wanted it. So I'll just show you that again. I went to move the pivot table, say I typed it in and it was saying, I don't like the way you're typing. So I just clicked where I wanted it and then it moved just fine. So I'm gonna move it back. Where do you want it? I think C2. There we go. Now, I'm going to make sure that my columns are wide enough so I can see the headers. That's nice. I'm going to move my slicers up towards the left. But see, you can resize your slicers. I'm going to make them a little thinner. And when I see scroll bars, oh, I don't want scroll bars so I can see everything. So there's the sales rep. Here's the product. Just make it big enough so I can see everything. There we go. And then the quarter. I may make that a little smaller. And now it's just a process of rearranging everything. So let me try it this way. And get the quarters up there. So you got to decide how you want it. I'm just kind of moving it around. I'll move my table over a little bit, my chart, I mean. There we go. I think that looks nice. And for the perfectionists in the room, I can select quarter, hold my shift key down, select region, and look at, I got slicer tools. I can align them to the top, so now they're perfectly lined up. And I can align these two to the left. Perfect. And you can also change the design on them. So I'm going to select all four. And in the styles, maybe do a different color so they stand off. So they're still working because now I can see Anderson. What is Anderson doing in cameras in the second quarter in the Midwest? Right there. So everything is working. I've got enough room for everything now. But for those of you that are really paying attention, you might have noticed, see the products have a misspelled word. So it's all coming off of this data sheet, remember? So any changes you make to this data set. So I'm going to do a find and replace. I'm going to say, hey, find Bluetooth. Oh, no, I want to find the misspelled Bluetooth. So find, how did they misspell it? Where is it? Oh, now that I need a misspelled word, I can't find it. I know how I can find it quick. So they did an A. Okay, so find that and replace it with this. It's just my typing, guys. So I'm going to find this word, copy. Find that and replace it with Bluetooth. All right. So any changes that you make in the sheet will automatically change in your slicer. So once I refresh the data, that will go away. And you can refresh the data under your Analyze tools right there. So now I've got this set up nicely, and my data will be changing, because if your data doesn't change, get your resume going. So data always changes. And now I'm going to just change the style of this chart just to make sure it looks a little nicer. And when I say nicer, I just want it easier to read. That's what nicer means. So I'm going to kind of clear some data, put some data in here so I can see. Uh-oh. My entire Excel just died. I'm going to see if I can recover that file. Okay. This does not normally happen. I don't think this is the file I was working with. That is so weird. Okay. So I did an auto recovery. I got it. Not too bad. I can fix this up pretty quick. So remember, I just selected this chart. I exited. I cut it, I mean. I put it over here. Copy and paste. Just let me reconnect my slicers as a review. And I have no idea why my Excel just died. But thank God for auto recovery. Because I'm going to still be able to pull this off. Alrighty. So now I'm doing my report connections. There we go. I was going to change the chart style. Let me get rid of that. And you pick a style, like I was saying, that you can see the numbers. People can make decisions. That's the one you use. Whatever you think is the best. I do have to change this back to the sum because it's counting. So there we go. And pretend I'm rearranging it just perfectly, okay? You saw me rearrange it before, but you know you can move the pivot table. You know you can rearrange everything, line everything up nicely. Kind of a perfectionist here, so I'm going to do those. All right, there. So the chart, put a title in. And here's, now I'm cleaning it up. I'm going to clean up this sheet. Because look at this chart. It has all these extra buttons that I don't need. So when I click on my pivot chart, this pane pops up. That's now a PAIN. So under your pivot chart tools, under Analyze, way over on the right, you can turn that field list off. Because I see people that work on pivot tables and they've had a pivot table for 2 years and that pane still pops open. Why is that? Turn that pane off. So now that won't be popping open. And if you need it, remember, it's right there. Also the buttons. I don't need all these little buttons. So I'm going to hide them all. So now I do have it the way I want. Let me fix up my legend real quick. That's the only thing that I did not do. because remember we had a little Excel crashing on me. Okay, so now that's clean. Same thing with the pivot table now. When I clean on that, click on that, I mean, I don't need the field list anymore, and I don't need all those buttons. So now I clean that up. Now I want to turn it into a dashboard. So again, you can spend time rearranging these, make it look nice. That's the goal, right? But it's a dashboard that my people, my colleagues will interact with. So I don't want them to see all these other spreadsheets. So I hide them, especially the one with the data in it. Because I don't think my colleagues would purposely do anything bad, but accidentally. So I hide everything. To unhide, you just right click and unhide. So now they can't see any other spreadsheet. I'm going to change the background color. So that little tool where the A and 1 intersects selects the entire worksheet. And I'm going to do a fill color of light gray, which is a really nice background color for pivot tables and dashboards. I can also insert a picture because it's our company logo. So I just happen to have a picture here. So you can insert a picture for your company logo and arrange it wherever you'd like. And then hang on to your seats for this next one. This is the final touches. You go to view. And you know what? I don't need grid lines. So seeing the view in the show group, I don't need grid lines. The people interacting with the sheet don't need the formula bar. They don't need to see the headings. And really, you don't even need to see the ribbon. So the ribbon, if you double click on a tab, it collapses it. To get it back, just double click on it again. But now that's a dashboard. It's interactive. You share this on OneDrive, in SharePoint, and now everybody that needs to see our data can just go in and say, okay, what did Anderson and Scott do in the West on mobile phones? Boom. So there it is. That's a dashboard. And this leads us, I mean, right here, it's beautiful. Right here, right? Like I just said, you share it with people, you save it, you put it on OneDrive or SharePoint. But dashboards are a critical tool for analyzing and understanding data. And this is how you build them in Excel. But Excel also has a powerful tool called Powerpivot, which you can build models, data models, and do a much higher level of data analysis. But you make a dashboard just like this with Powerpivot. You turn that on under options. And then another tool in Microsoft's tool bag is Power BI. And Power BI is a free download. You can get it for free, and you can analyze data from over 150 data sources. And talking about building visuals, you can build really super nice visuals with what's called Power BI. So there's a dashboard that you can be proud of. But then you also make dashboards like interactive dashboards like this. If you want to see how many home runs the Minnesota Twins have hit, And these are all dashboards in what's called Power BI. Okay, so wow, I went through a lot of information, a lot, but I hope that it was beneficial for you. And we did the objectives. So I'll open it up for a Q&A for a while, and let's see how that goes.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mike. There are a few questions already in there, but just we'll give folks a few more minutes to type in any other questions that may have, that you may have, and we'll get to them. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here. Just a quick reminder, if you're interested in any of the material that's presented in this webinar, or if you have any questions regarding what's available to you in terms of course offerings or just more details about Excel, please contact your local center for more information. You can log on to newhorizons.com and do a quick zip code search to find the center that is nearest you. We do have our webinar schedule up to date on newhorizons.com as well. We have a few more sessions before we close the 2020 year, so please take a look at that and see if any of our remaining sessions pique your interest. And another quick reminder, the recording of the session will be sent out later today, so please be on the lookout for that. All right, getting to questions here, Mike. One of the first questions that came in, and I believe it was during the earlier portion of your demo here, someone had asked, what are the hotkeys for Control Home and Control End?
Oh, Control Home brings you to the very top of the data. So it brings you home, right, to the top of your data set. Control End, E-N-D, Control End, which is right below your home key. That brings you to the end of your data.
Great. Another question that did come up was, how do you unhide a sheet?
Oh, you just right-click the tab. You got to have one tab. They won't let you hide all of them, so there'll always be one tab. Then you right-click it, and you choose Unhide, and then a little dialog box opens up, and then you select the one that you want to unhide.
Great. And another question that came in is it possible to report connections for all slicers in one fell swoop?
No, and that's a little bit of a hassle. Yeah, I wish I could select them all, but you got to do them one by one by one. Now, think about it though. Four or five are going to be the tops. You're not going to have a ton of slicers normally. So it's not too bad, but I wish I could. I really wish I could. That would be an awesome feature.
Great. Another one that came in relation to slicers is, can you select all if the slicers at, sorry, let me just rephrase that. Can we select all of the slicers at one time and connect them? And it seems like you might have just answered that one question here.
Yep.
Another person had typed in, they say, I'm old school and use a drag and drop for pivot tables. Can you use this feature the same way with slicers and charts?
I'm not sure about what is meant by drag and drop. Drag and drop the data, drag and drop. Now, wait a minute. Maybe I think what is meant is when you're building the table, if you can just drag and drop here. And yeah, that is very acceptable. That's a really good way. Normally what I do is just turn on the fields that I need. I'm like, okay, what's the question? And then I turn on the fields that will answer the question, and then drag and drop them into the quadrants. But if you want to drag and drop them right from here, absolutely, that's just fine. Yes, I love drag and drop too.
Great. Another question that came in is, what is the difference between what you just showed everyone in terms of building a dashboard and Powerpivot Power Query?
Okay, that's a, well, all these questions are good, you know, obviously, but Powerpivot is a much more robust data management tool. Because right now, with this pivot table, I'm just making a pivot table and a pivot chart off of a flat table, just one table. So with Powerpivot, though, you can build data models, just like you would in, say, Access or SQL. So you can have several tables, join them, and then get much more data analytical power with data models. Another big thing is that a spreadsheet only holds 1,048,000 rows. And yes, that's a lot, and that's a lot when you think about entering data. But if you're working with a big corporation that is tracking every single sales of, say, Cheerios all over the world, you can run out of 1 million rows really quick. So a Powerpivot holds up to, this is odd, but 3 rows shy of 1 billion. So it holds up to 1 billion rows of data. So that's the two big differences: the amount of data, the data connections, and the data models. I hope that helps.
It does. I know we have a minute left, so a couple questions left here. Why, the question here is, why are the two different pivot tables? Why are there two different pivot tables? Could you not have used a single pivot chart and add the slicers to that? Hopefully I'm asking that correctly.
Yeah, we could have done it a couple different ways, but I just wanted a different answer with the table and a different answer with the chart. Because these are looking at slightly different questions. Now, I could have just built one pivot table and one chart, right? Because when you build a chart, you get a free pivot table. I could have did it off of that easily. But the reason why I chose to do this is there's slightly different questions. And then that way I could show you things like, hey, look, there's a table. You can cut and paste charts. And then if they're coming from two different places, reconnect the slicers. So I couldn't show you all that if I would have just did it on one.
Great, thank you. We are at the top of the hour, everyone. Just wanted to say, Mike, thank you as always for presenting on behalf of New Horizons and educating us again on the everyday application that we use. So much appreciated. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. We had a lot of great questions. And hopefully we can see you all on another session with us, another webinar in the future. With that being said, everyone take care. Have a great holiday for those who are in the US next week, and you may now log off from the webinar. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.